somebody sent it. I think Maurice sent it.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're on Mem Zayin Amud Beis. We are on 47B. Okay, Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Continuing in the Gemara. Very fascinating Gemara. Oma Ravuna. So first, yesterday we had a fascinating Gemara. We ended with the idea that if you're from the first 10 people to the Minyan, you get tremendous reward. You get reward schar kineged kulam. Your reward is equal to everybody else's reward that comes. Everybody else that comes to the Minyan, your reward is so it equals all those people's reward, because let's say you brought the Shekhinah. You were the one who brought the Shekhinah, the divine presence, down to the, by being the first man. You were the one who created that the Shekhinah. So therefore, everybody else is just riding on your actions, and therefore you're going to get the reward of Keneged Kulam. So they just bring down the Marsha that says that since the first 10 people, the Shekhinah was on them. The people who came number 11 and number 12 did not create the Shekhinah. They're just joining into the Tefillah. So therefore, you're going to be getting reward corresponding to everybody else because of what you've accomplished, because you've brought the Shekhinah down to this place, and only because of you are they praying with the Shekhinah? Okay, so therefore you get reward equal to all of them. Now the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Huna, about 6-7 lines from the bottom. Good morning, Shmuel. Good to see you. Amar Rav Huna. Tisha v'Aron. If you have 9 men, we'll say hello to the young child, the nice child, very cute. Good morning, how are you? What's your name?
She cannot hear you. I'm in earpiece.
Oh, okay.
So her name is Mili. Mili is Mi Ladonai. Ani Ladonai v'Adonai Li. It's Mili.
Very good. Anina Dodi v'Dodi Li.
Yeah.
Now, Tisha v'Aron, 9 people, and we have the Aron Kodesh. You're praying in a synagogue. And the Aron means there's a Sefer Torah inside the Aron, not just there's an Aron with no Sefer Torah. There's a Sefer Torah. There's an opinion in the Gemara, at least the first, originally, Rav Huna said, Tisha v'Aron mitztarfin. You could join the Aron Kodesh that has the Sefer Torah. That's enough to go ahead and be counted as a minyan, to make a minyan. What does that mean? That means to say that the fact that you have 9 people, you're missing 1. So the Sefer Torah will serve in a certain sense that the 9 men that have a certain Kedusha, they have a holiness, and now you have also a Sefer Torah in the room. So that will act will take the place of number 10, and you could go in and have a minyan in such a fashion. That's what the Gemara, the first version of Huna said.
So that's what I heard, Rabbi. That's what I heard also in many times, when I was praying with a different group of praying, not Safra. And a few times with Sephardic, the Sephardic don't do that for some reason. I don't know why. That's what I heard. If you have 9 in the Torah, you can bring the Torah out, and the Torah will be like the number 10.
But obviously, it's not universally accepted. We'll see. Even in our Gemara, the Gemara is going to. We'll see what our Gemara is going to say. I was once in a shul. It's a Beis Medrash HaGadol. Rabbi Asher was a big Talmud Chacham. He was the rabbi. There was 9 people there. What he did was, there was the 10th man. There was a katan. and there was a young child, and he gave him a chumash to hold. But there was he relied on such a reliance of 9 plus a katan, a child holding a chumash. That's what he did. And when I recall once upon a time looking into the matter, that's something that you shouldn't generally rely on. Maybe only under special circumstances, they rely on such a thing. But there was he was actually a child. It wasn't just 9 people and just using the Aron, the Sefer Torah or something. But we have
Yeah,
to.
I know Chabad, for example, I know they count on Katan that is before Bar Mitzvah and he's observing Shabbat and he's doing all the Chukim and he really just maybe 2-3 months before Bar Mitzvah. They will then maybe will take him as a count, but otherwise they would not take anything else. You know what I mean?
But would they give him a chumash to hold? What would they do?
He's praying. He's part of the Minyan. He will pray with the Minyan.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's interesting. Morning, Morris. Okay, so now look what our Gemara says. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman questioned him, and he said, "The Aron Gavrahu, is the Aron a person that you could count the Aron to join the Minyan?" Ella Amar Rav Huna. Is that Morris? Morning, Morris. Ella Amar Rav Huna. So what does Rav Huna say? He says, you know what? It's Nirin Tisha Nirin Kasara. You won't count the Aron. You won't count the Sefer Torah as number 10. But if you have 9 people, if they look like 10, if they're situated in a way that they look like a minyan, mitzarfin, you could go ahead and count that as if there's a minion, even when there's no 10. When is that? If it looks like 10, meaning to say that the idea of a minyan is you have to, in order to go ahead and pray and say certain things, right? We need a minyan to say Kaddish. We need a minyan to say Kedusha. So he says he has a leniency, which we don't follow this leniency. He says if it looks like 10, so therefore it's honorable enough to say Kedusha. You want to say Kedusha? You want to say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh? You want to say Kaddish? It has to have at least the appearance of a minyan. At least that it has an appearance of a quorum. It looks like there's 10 people, so therefore then it's a state of it's respectable enough that you could go ahead and say that this holy special prayer, because it's a respectful look. It's respectful. It has 10. It looks like 10 people. Amrila, some say kimikanfi. When the 9 people are gathered together, so when you have 9 people standing together, it's hard to tell. Is there 9 people here? Is there 10 people here? So therefore, that would be the case, the scenario that Rav Huna would have his leniency. They could go ahead and count and accept these 9, even though you don't have a minyan. But the fact that it looks like 10 is good enough. Again, that's not the halacha, but that's what Rav Huna says. And for Armila and others say, no, it's not when the 9 are together, rather ki mevadri, when the 9 are scattered around. You go to a shul and there are people all over the place. It's hard how many do we have a minyan? It's hard to count. And maybe we have 9, maybe look at it looks like 10. We don't know. We have to make a very clear count. So therefore, the other opinion is if they're separated from each other, they're spread out, then it looks like 10. And when it looks like 10, and that's the fashion, it looks like 10. And therefore you could go ahead and count, and that's good enough. And you could do the Davar Shebekidusha. That's the leniency of Rav Huna. Amar Rav Ami. Now the Gemara is moving towards. Now you see, the question is when we said 9 and the Aron and 9, the previous Gemara, are we specifically talking about Zimun, or we're talking about Minyan? Because the Gemara before was talking about Minyan. That was the last point in, the Gemara was talking about Minyan. The Gemara was also talking about Zimun. So this halacha of 9 and our own, or 9 people that are scattered around. See, I would say it's referring to prayer, because generally Zimun, it's not that people are scattered around. People are eating together, usually are not scattered around together. I want to see what other commentaries say on this, because remember, the obligation, I mean, it's true, you don't have to all be together to be obligated in the Zimun, as long as we're sitting, we see each other, we're eating as a group, even if we're not sitting all at the same table. That's also a scenario that you'll be obligated in the Zimun. So let's see what they say over here. So it says over here, Tisha v'Aron, if you have 9 people and you have an Aron, they combine to complete a Minyan. So here they didn't clarify in the art scroll a Minion for what purpose. Is it a Minion for davening, or is it a Minion for Zimun? Okay. So now the Gemara continues. Now we're getting to Zimun. The Gemara says, you have Amar Rav Ami, Shnayim v'Shabbat, 2 people that ate a meal together, but they ate it on Shabbat. So Rav Ami says, Mitzdarfim, you could go ahead, and that's good enough because of the Shabbat, the holiness of the Shabbat. You could go ahead and make a Zimun. That's the first version of Rav Ami, that you could go ahead and make a Zimun on Shabbat with 2 people. Even though we concluded in the Gemara before, 2 people don't have a right to make a Zimun. For Zimun, you need 3 people, and we said the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Gadu la Hashem iti. You're talking to 2 people. Gadu la Hashem iti. With me, there's 3 people. But nevertheless, there's a new phenomenon when you have Shabbat. The Shabbat gives it a chashivut, and it's not just you and the other guy. It's you, the other guy, in Shabbat. It's like a guy gets married. It's not just you and your wife. It's you, your wife, and God, right? You have the Shekhinah with you, a husband, a man, and a woman. When they act properly with each other, when they treat each other properly, it's not only the husband and the wife are in. Who's home? Husband. Who's home? Husband, the wife, and God is home with you, right, Shmuel? God is with you when you have Shalom Bayit, when people treat their wife properly. God is there. So come Shabbat. So he says Shabbat is here. So we have 3 people. We don't have 3 people. It's not Shabbat is not a person. But we have a halacha by Shabbat that when you make a sheva brachot for a chatan, in general, you need panim chadashot. You need to have, if you want to make sheva brachot, you need to have Ashkenazim have 1 new person that did not participate in the wedding, or not participate in the simcha. Could be the Svarim, maybe, I think they might hold of, they bring 2 new people. Or some Svarim bring 2 people that did not participate in the wedding. Shabbat, it says you don't need panim chadashot. On Shabbat, for the Friday night meal, the Shabbat day meal, there's discussion about the Suda Shlishit, but you don't need panim chadashot. You don't need a new face on Friday night. The Shabbat is the new face. The Shabbat adds to the simcha. And you don't need to have a new person to come in order to say Sheva Brachot. The Shabbat is the new thing. So maybe that's the idea that the Gemara is saying, that the rabbi said that when you have on Shabbat, when you have 2 people coming together, That in itself, Rav Huna said, therefore that it's a new, it's not just two people here. And therefore you can make this imun. It's now, it's reached a state, a higher state, an elevated state. And because of this higher elevated state, you could go ahead and say a zimun. That's the original statement. The original statement of Rav Ami is you can actually count the Shabbat the way as instead of the third person, you could count the Shabbat. Rav Nachman said, "Hey, how could you do that?" Amalei Rav Nachman, the Shabbat gavrahu, is Shabbat a person? How could you go ahead and count the Shabbat as for number 3 for a zimun? It's not a person. The way we're explaining it, even true, it's not a person, but it's a different level. It's, the idea is two people giving you need for bracha. We said of zimun, it's a bracha of tziruf. You need 3 people to be that type of bracha that you're going, to do a bracha in a group. You need to you have to reach a certain level of 3 people in order to have that group bracha to Hashem of zimun. And Rav Huna Rav Ami understands, at least at the first way he thought he was speaking, that I don't need to have 3 when it's Shabbat. I'm already in a certain level. I'm already in a higher level because I have the Shabbat together with the 2 people. But Rav Nachman takes issue, and he says Shabbat is not a gavra, Shabbat is not a person. Elo Amar Rav Ami. So Rav Ami changes his mind. And he says, Amar Rav Ami, and by the way, it's very similar to the previous Gemara that Rav Huna originally thought that you could count the Sefer Torah as number 10, because it's a different entity. We're having a Sefer Torah in the room when you have 9 people. So rather he says, Amar Rav Nachman, El Amar Rav Ami, Shnei Talmidei Chachamim. If you have 2 Talmidei Chachamim, Hamachaditim Zeh Ez Zeh B'Halacha, that sharpen each other in halacha. Those 2 people that sharpen each other in halacha, you could go ahead, mitzarfim. You go ahead and the halacha that they're sharpening themselves in halacha, that in itself could act as instead of the third person, mitzarfim. Now, the obvious question is, how does that answer the question? The fact that they sharpen each other in halacha, but there's no 3 people here. There's 2 Talmidei Chachamim. And what are they doing? They're sharpening each other with halacha. That means they're talking halacha. They're discussing halacha. So that creates a new entity that you could go ahead and count them into the as if this is make a zimun. So again, what would be the pshat? How we understand the fact that you sharpen each other in halacha, that makes it that you can make a zimun with such a thing. So I see in the commentaries they discuss so the Slach asked this question. So this is something that we need to think about. How does the sharpening in halacha, how does that act why should that be good enough as if you have 3 people? You do not have 3 people. What does it help that they sharpen each other in halacha? So that's something that we need to think about. Maybe we'll look into this a little further. So now the Gemara says, Machvi Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda showed Kigonana Rav Sheshet. When I and Rav Sheshet, when we discuss halacha, we sharpen each other, because what happens is when you discuss a subject, one rabbi, I ask the question, the other rabbi gives back an answer, and this we're sharpening each other through our discussion, with each other. So and Machmi Rav Sheshes also says, Rav Chisda, us together, we sharpen each other in halacha, and since we sharpen each other in halacha, that would be equal to, that's enough to go ahead and do a zimun. The two rabbis sharpening each other in halacha, let's say during the meal, they ask each other questions and they discuss the Torah learning. That would be considered good enough for zimun. As I see in the back in the Yalkut Beurim and the Masifta the Gemara, they have many explanations what the Gemara means. So some Rishonim say that the intention of the Gemara is, since they're engaged in halacha, the halacha is like a third person. It's equal to a third. Now again, but that's why should the halacha be like it's not a person. The Meiri says that the Gemara means if two Talmidei Chachamim, two Torah scholars, they sharpen each other in halacha, but they did not go ahead and eat together. There was a third person that ate with one of them. So we're going to say that the Talmid Chacham could join them even though he did not sit with them, because the halacha joins them as if they ate together. So what he's saying is you had two Torah scholars and they were going at it, discussing halacha, but they didn't eat together. And the other guy that he was discussing halacha with, the other rabbi discussed halacha with, ate with a different person. So the fact that these two Talmidei Chachamim were discussing Torah together, the discussion of the Torah together makes it as if you ate together, because you were involved together with him. You weren't involved together with him in eating. You were involved together with him in a Torah discussion, and that Torah discussion is like I'm with this. It's as if I sat and ate together with him. We said you need 3 people to go ahead and eat together in order to be obligated to zimun. So when you have 2 people that ate together, but the third person did not eat together, but he studied Torah together with the group, that he was a Torah scholar that was sharpening the other Torah scholar. That's what the Gemara means. But if there was never a third person, it wouldn't work, because you need 3 people for the zimun. You can't just count the fact people are studying halacha as the third person. That's the Meiri, a beautiful shot of the Meiri that now we have a nice idea of to understand what the Gemara is saying. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan. Now we are on the Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the following, 3 lines from the bottom. Katan poreach. A katan is poreach. So the katan has signs of puberty. He has some hairs growing. He's not 13 years old yet. Mizamnim olav. You could count him in. Rabbi Yochanan says you could count him into the zimun. Now, the halacha, the Svarim are much more lenient than the Svarim, than the Ashkenazim. And they don't even require him to have hairs of puberty. He could be younger than that. They allow him to join the zimun. The Ashkenazim are require that everyone has to be over bar mitzvah in order to go ahead and join a zimun. The Svardim say much younger. It says in Shulchan Aruch and Simon Kuf Sadik Tes, Sif Yud, it says Katan, he reaches the age that he knows to who you're saying the bracha to. You could count them into the zimun. The Chafetz Chaim says 9 or 10. Some say even if he's 6 and above, if he's a sharp kid and he knows who you're saying, who you're saying, who the bracha, he knows what's going on, he knows you're saying what it's all about. You can count them into zimun. So according to the Chafetz Chaim, the Shulchan Aruch holds, Mechaber holds, if he's a sharp kid, it could be even 6, 7. If he's not a sharp kid, the average, the 9 or 10-year-old, you can count it into zimun, whether for a zimun of 3 or whether a zimun of 10. And the Ashkenaz opinion says, he has to be 13 years old. And in the Yalkut Yosef, in the Kish Shulchan Aruch, and Simin Kuf Tzadik Tes, it says, he says, if a katan is 6 years old and he knows who you're giving the bracha to, he knows how to say a bracha, he's 6 years old, over 6 and above, you could count them for a zimun. How do you like that? Whether for a zimun of 3 or whether a zimun of 10. You only can count one katan. You can't count more than one child to a zimun or for the 10. Now our Gemara is going to be a little bit of the source and the background for this halacha. So it says, Katan Poreach. If you can count them in for a zimun. But Yochanan seems to hold he has to have signs of puberty. If he doesn't have signs of puberty, he's not of that age, of that level of maturity, you cannot count them into the zimun. We have a bracha also that says this. Excuse me. If the katan has 2 hairs, signs of puberty, then you count them into the zimun. If he did not bring 2 sairot, ain't mizamin alof. You cannot count them into the zimun. And then the Gemara, the bracha concludes, the ein medaktikin bekatan. We are not particular regarding the child. In order to count them into the zimun, we are not so particular about it. Now, the Gemara is going to say it seems to be a contradiction, because you first said if he brought 2 hairs, he has to have a katan that has signs of puberty, you count them into the zimun. And then you say, which seems to indicate that you're very specific, you're very exact. It has to have 2 hairs to count them in the katan, but not just he's 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, he has to have 2 hairs. That's the signs of puberty. And then you say, katan. We're not particular about a katan, which sounds like you're not so careful, concerned about the puberty, having signs of maturity. So the Gemara asks, Hagufa Kasha, Omid Hevishtei Sairot. You told me if he brought 2 sairot in, that's when you count. Then if he has signs of puberty, maturity, then you count them in. Low, heavy, low. But if he did not have the signs of puberty, you did not count them in. And then you said, then you said, you're not so particular about a katan, which seems to indicate if you're not particular about a katan, that means he does not need to have the signs of maturity. You just said a moment ago, it needs to have signs of maturity. That's the Gemara's contradiction. What's going on? How could the bracha say in the same breath, it needs to have signs of maturity, but we're not so particular about the katan? The Gemara says, Lasuye mai, lav lasuye. You know what it's coming to say? It's not, it means something else. Lasuye, the Gemara says now on Memches lasuye katan poreach. It's coming to teach us, the Gemara says, a katan poreach, which means to say this is support of what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said, meaning this, the Gemara is doing, is bringing support for Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the child reaches as signs of maturity, you can count them in. But he does not need to be 13 to count them in, Rabbi Yochanan says. But what does he need? Signs of maturity. And the Gemara proves it from the bracha. Because the bracha says that it needs 2 hairs, needs signs of maturity, and the bracha also says, but you're not particular by the katan. Now, what does it mean you're not particular by the katan? What does the bracha mean? You tell me you need to have signs of maturity. So my lav, it has to be my lav. The bracha means la suye katan poreach. The bracha means you're not medakdek that he has to be 13. That's what we mean. We mean the aim medakdekim katan. If he has signs of maturity, he does not need to be 13. That's what it means, aim medakdekim. We don't say, how old are you? You have signs of maturity, that's good enough. And that's the support to Rabbi Yochanan. And then the Gemara says, the Gemara says the law does not follow many of these things that the Amoraim just said. We just said, if you have 2 Talmidei Chachamim that are sharpening each other in halacha, you could count them in for as if they're 3 people. You can't, the halacha doesn't follow that. We also just said, there's an opinion that says 9 that look like 10. You could count it. You could count as a minyan or as if you have 10. If they look like 10, either they're scattered or they're together. The halacha doesn't follow that, the Gemara says. And it seems the Gemara is saying the halacha doesn't follow the last thing we said as well. We said, Rabbi Yochanan said, katan, that has size of maturity, that's the katan you could count into zimun. But if he doesn't have size of maturity, you cannot count him into zimun. So now, this is one way to read the Gemara, is no, we don't require even that. We don't require a child has to have size of maturity in order to count them into the zimun. Rather, and this is how the Svarim will learn, the Gemara, ki had Amar Nachman, katan hayodei alamim mevorchin mizamnu alav. It's good enough if the katan knows to who you're saying the zimun, who's the bracha. When you're saying nevarech shachal mishalo, let's give a, what is zimun? It's the bracha that you're saying. Let's say a bracha to the one that we ate from. We're giving a bracha to Hashem. If he understands who Hashem is, he understands what God means. That's the katan that you can count to the zimun. He does not need to go ahead and have size of maturity. It doesn't have to be 12 years old or whatever the age is that the child has size of maturity. It's good enough that he knows, that the katan knows lamim vorchin, and like we saw in the Yalkut Yosef, 6, 7, 8, they might be already of age to count them into the zimun. And the Gemara says a very nice story. We'll end with the nice story. Abaye v'Rava have a Yosfi kamei de Rabbah. Abaye and Rava was sitting in front of Rabbah. Now, Rabbah, I think, raised Abaye. And it says they were young men sitting together, even though we know it's interesting in the Gemara, Abaye and Rava argued they argued a lot on each other, like Beshame, Besil, Abaye and Rava. And they grew up together, so to speak. They were sitting together. And Amalu Rabbah said, Lemim vorchim, when we're about to say zimun, who do we say the bracha to? Who are we making the bracha to? Are we making the bracha to the President of the United States? Who is saying the bracha to? Lemim vorchim. Amri lei, they said to him, Lenachmana. When we say the bracha, we're saying the bracha to Hashem, to the all-merciful one, Hashem. V'rachamana hechi yosef. So Rabbah says, where does God dwell? Where is the dwelling of God? Rava achvalei l'shmei talala. Rava pointed to the ceiling. That's where God is. God dwells he's over there. He's in the Shemayim, like the ceiling. Abaye nofek lebara. Abaye went outside, and what did he do? Achvei l'klapi shmaya. He pointed towards the heavens. Omeru Rabbah. Rabbah said to them, Tavaichu Rabban Havito. You both are going to be rabbis. I see that you were very young at this time, and you were able to go ahead and to show where Hashem is, you saw that shows greatness. That in the future you're going to be great rabbis. Now, I would like to suggest we see the idea of becoming a great rabbi is interconnected with Yiras Shamayim. You want to be a rabbi, a big rabbi, Rabbanan. If it's not just about scholarly and understanding and being very smart and knowledge. It has to do with the derech eretz kodem l'Torah, the Yiras Shamayim, Torah the Yiras Shamayim. They're able to know they at such a young age, they're able to point that God's over there, God's Shamayim, and so on and so forth. That is going to be a key to knowing that the person is going to be a Torah scholar in the future. Because if he has Yiras Shamayim, therefore he's going to go ahead and be diligent in his studies and so on and so forth, and apply himself properly because he's Yiras Shamayim. It's also going to help him in that fashion. And the Gemara says, Hainu the army in she. That is what people say. Bootsin, small pumpkins. Mikatfei yediyah. As soon as the pumpkin begins to sprout from the vine and it starts budding into a fruit, you could see whether it's going to become a good pumpkin or not a good pumpkin. So too, that's the same thing with these young future rabbis. That you could see by the fact of their level of Yiras Shamayim, of being God-fearing, that you could see they're very young, but you could see the future that they're going to be very great Torah scholars. So I just think the lesson, and therefore they became from the greatest Torah scholars, Abaye and Rava. I think the lesson to all of us is that we need to educate the children when they're young in Yiras Shamayim, in being God-fearing. Because if they're going to be God-fearing when they're young and so on and so forth, they're going to be able to, therefore that's going to go ahead and help them. It's going to stand strong with them when they grow up. They're going to want to use their time properly. And in order to become a Torah scholar, you have to put in time, a lot of effort. And if they have Yiras Shamayim, if they're God-fearing, Be'ez Hashem, they're going to go ahead and be very successful in their studies.
Rabbi, so let's just summary. So the Katan is below 12, below 13, right?
Right.
And he can count if he have puberty.
So now the Gemara is concluding, according to the way some commentators understand, we're talking about Zimun. We're not talking about Minyan for 10 in the shul. We're talking about Minyan for 10 in the shul, we cannot count the Katan. There may be a special circumstance, Yosef, that maybe they will take a chumash and give it to the Katan. But generally we don't count the Katan for Minyan. I have to see more about that halacha. Maybe next week we'll go look more into that. We generally don't count the Katan for Minyan to pray. However, for Zimun, we will count the Katan. For Zimun, we will count the Katan, and he could be, if a Svarim, he could be a young boy, 7, 8 years old. If he's smart, that he understands about Hashem, he understands, when you do Zimun, he understands what's going on, then you could count him in for Zimun. We're going to be much more lenient by Zimun than a Minyan and Shul.
Okay.
I make it clear. For Minyan and Shul, right, we're going to be much stricter. We're not going to just say, take a 7-year-old boy and count him into the Minyan, an 8-year-old boy and count him in Minyan and Shul. But when it comes to Zimun, we are much more lenient. For the Svardim, they go ahead and they count the 7-year-old boy into Zimun. For 3, if you have 2 men over Bar Mitzvah, and the third one is a Katan, you can count them in for the Svardim into Zimun. I mean, he does not need the age of puberty. He doesn't need maturity for the Svardim. And Ashkenazim say it's all about 13. They don't say anything else. Ashkenazim hold that in order to count him into Zimun, he has to be 13. Svardim say there's nothing, it's all about if he understands what's going on, and he reached the age of 6, 7, 8, maybe, some say 9, whatever, different ages, you could start counting him into the Zimun. Am I clear or not clear?
So if I have 2 kids, one is almost 8 and one is almost 13, I can count them into my Zimun?
So Rabbi Vadi says, no, you need to have, you only can count one minor, only one minor. You can
Only
count
one minor.
You can count the 8-year-old to 2. If you have 2 adults over bar mitzvah, then you can count the 8-year-old.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah,
So when your son becomes bar mitzvah, then you can count the other son.
I got you.
When's your son becoming bar mitzvah?
Huh?
When is your son becoming bar mitzvah?
I think mid of December.
Okay? So before you know it, you'll have a zimun in your house if you follow the Sephardi customs.
Yeah, we are. We're trying.
Yes,
Although everything is in Ashkenaz around us. So heavy influence Ashkenazi.
But you have Shmuel Reis.
Yeah, he's also heavily influenced in Chabad Ashkenaz.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, there's one Torah. Okay, I want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat.
תודה רבה.
Thank you for all for joining. I'll be on Bez Hashem. Look forward to Sunday, Bez Hashem.
תודה רבה.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good
Shabbat
day.
shalom.
Bye-bye. Take care, Morris. Take care. All the best.